Welcome to a Tyler's Place podcast quick cut. Well, not so quick this time around, but a couple of weeks ago on the show, I told you that I had done a nice long sit-down interview with our new Lieutenant Grand Commander, Brother Mike Smith, SGIG of South Carolina, and it was a long, great interview. I didn't have time to get the whole thing in the Tyler's Place podcast proper, so here, unedited, unaltered, is my interview with Brother Mike Smith, our Lieutenant Grand Commander. I'm really excited to sit down and have the opportunity to chat with Illustrious Brother Mike Smith. He is the SGIG of South Carolina, but also our newly elected Lieutenant Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction. So when you're in that council room and then they read the election and your name comes back, excited? A weight hit you? What was the reaction?
Well, first and foremost, humbled by that peer group to say, we have confidence in you in this role. Support role for all the members in that council room, but more especially for the craft that are in our valleys and in the orients around the jurisdiction.
Well, let's start at the beginning. I know, like myself, not a lot of folks have had the opportunity to sit down and talk with you. Tell us a little bit about Mr. Mike Smith, where you come from. I know South Carolina. I can hear it in your voice. And so tell us a little bit about your journey from boyhood on into Masonry, on into LGC.
Well, we can really turn that accent on if you want us to, Maynard, but bless your heart, son. No, I was born in a little small town called Landrum in the upper portion of the state and grew up there, small town, great family values, great place to grow up. And as a matter of fact, my wife and I selected a home not far from there to raise our kids. So we're, a few miles south of that, but in the same general vicinity. I would say that Masonry came to me through my grandfather. He was very active. He worked in a textile mill, had a side job of being a shoe cobbler, so modest means, family. But ever so often I would see him as a young boy dressed in a tuxedo and my grandmother in a full formal gown and going to shrine events. He was exceedingly proud to be a Mason. And later years, my father became a Mason only a few years before I did, but he became the personal rep in the Spartanburg Valley, not too far away from the time that I became a very active member. But through family, friends, that's how I got involved with Masonry, and particularly Scottish Rite. I would say that one of the things that impressed me from my hometown is their lodge was in town, and I would walk by that little lodge room, which is still my membership's there today. And it was that little lodge room that you went by on the way to buy bubble gum and baseball cards, those kind of things in the 60s and the early 70s, I guess. And I got to know some of the men in town that were part of the Masonic fraternity. And I knew what it meant to my grandfather, so that's what made me pursue it at age 21.
Wow! So right minute you were legal, you went to the lodge.
Yep, I just finished my 40th year in Masonry in South Carolina in September. Went in September of '79. So it's been a fast 40 years. I got involved in Scottish Rite early on. Really liked the philanthropy and the fact that there was a lot of activity for younger guys. And at the time I joined in early '82. I believe I might have been the youngest guy by far and away in the building. So I spent a lot of time doing stage crew work and doing ritual work, and all that was very appealing to me. It appealed to my sense that there's more to the story in Masonry than I received in the Blue Lodge, which is still very active. I'm a chaplain in my lodge today. But Scottish Rite gave me that deeper understanding and a larger answer to the questions that I had about the esoteric nature and what does it mean. And a lot of that came from my early upbringing with a mother who was very devout and take us to church and make sure we understood and read and studied a lot over the course of my youth. So it was answering questions and giving me more insight into what I had seen and asked questions about previous.
So what did you do and I know you're not retired, you're still working, so you're juggling a lot of different things. So what do you do for a living? Tell us a little bit about your career, where you and how those skills influence the Scottish Rite work you do.
Well, I had the great pleasure to go to work for a privately held company called Milliken, and Milliken is a one family-owned private textile and chemical company in South Carolina. So it is, and it's been, I think we're now talking about the sixth generation of family members that still retain that ownership. So a global company, had a lot of great exposure to high values and integrity in business. It's hard to imagine with what we read and see sometimes today, but the values instilled in working for a company that was very highly motivated toward innovation, research, and integrity in what you do in business had a big influence. So through that, I was hired as an intern, working with some chemicals that were sugar derivatives that we were trying to do, Food and Drug Administration and or testing, to make sure that it would meet food-grade additive systems. That's how I got started, and from there I got to help develop a couple product lines, and now I'm a global sales manager for a consumer product line that the company has. We only have a couple items that are consumer-based, and so that gives me a chance to interact with a lot of the big national retail chains, Amazon, other things. So it's been an exciting and interesting venture to go through, use my scientific background and education, and take that into a technical marketing and sales approach.
So here's what I'm hearing, and this is where I get excited, is, a lot of guys talk about, when we talk about more light and masonry, and I think that means something different to everybody. And to me, what excites me is, how do I take these Masonic lessons and put them to work in my everyday life? And the history's interesting, and I'd love talking to Art about that, and, Brent, of course, and I love getting into the symbolism, but what really gets me excited is, how do I take this today and use it tomorrow to make myself better at what I'm doing, whether I'm talking about being a better dad or being a better professional. And I can see how, in the role that you're talking about there, the Masonic Study helped that along by just teaching you how to get along with different kinds of people. The lessons you're learning at your job, you can then bring into Masonry.
And I think you're right about that. I mean, we learn from our path and the different influences we have. So having worked with a company who really values integrity, hard work, and a value system that's built around solving problems was fun. And it also gave me the opportunity to meet with CEOs and presidents in the daytime, and general staff, and training opportunities with people throughout the country and, in fact, parts of the world. So it's given me a chance to be in front of people and with people and listen more intently, I think, because that's part of what the training was all about, is to understand what the role is.
That's really exciting. That's really interesting stuff. Now, I know that you're a past Grand Master, so and not all that long ago, correct? It was a couple years ago. So you were an SGIG for some time at that point, and then you become the past Grand Master. Talk about juggling a couple of big hats. That's tell me a little bit about that journey as a Blue Lodge Mason to become Grand Master.
Well, that's an interesting question. I was asked at a very young age in 2002 to consider becoming the deputy in South Carolina. At a very young age. I think I was 43 at the time. Jim Cole and I came in at the same time. I'm about 6 weeks younger than he is. So I'm
43 now. If they asked me to be the deputy to anything, I'd half pass out.
Well, it was right interesting. I'll tell the story. I walked in here for an interview with Grand Commander Klankenek, and I walked across the vestibule into his office, and he says, "Oh my gosh, you're awfully young." And I said, "I know that might be an issue." But we sat together, and we came away from that interview, and I was humbled to be offered that opportunity, more especially because it gave us a chance to travel and be with the craft. And what led to, I'd served in Grand Lodge committees and done the district deputies thing and Masonic education roles, finance, all kinds of different things, but I never really considered offering in South Carolina. You offer to serve as a junior Grand Warden, and that becomes part of a progressive line. Okay. And it takes you 8 years to complete that. But I had so many members that came to me and asked me would I consider offering. They liked some of the things we were doing in the Scottish Rite. They liked the fact that we were listening and trying things that were engaging members. And so I think that's what ultimately got me to agree to offer to do that. I was very fortunate to serve with some fantastic men and learn from some great Grand Masters that we had. I finished my term in April of 19, so just recently. But it was a wonderful experience. Some days you were juggling the balls pretty heavily, but thankfully I've got a great group of leaders in South Carolina in my 6 valleys that understood and took their responsibilities and did a great job during that term. So my visitation to valleys dropped a little, but we still were engaged. I tend to visit my valleys 4 to 6 times a year and try to be at all the reunions. And I know every SGIG and deputy has a plan based on their geography. Fortunately, South Carolina's geography allowed me to do that and tie the two together.
You take off one big hat and you become Lieutenant Grand Commander.
Well, I think the big thing here is, what you notice after you go out of the Grand Master's spot is how few emails you get in that vein and how few phone calls you get, at least in South Carolina. But I've been very active still. I still do a lot of lectures in our jurisdiction for the 3rd degree lecture. Do a lot with the degrees. I'm active in several degree teams still with Scottish Rite just because of the family connection. My home lodge, one of the best practices I think we've ever done is I think we have home lodges that will get together a group of Scottish Masons and will put on a degree that becomes kind of theirs. So my son, my father, my nephew, and my youngest son, all 3 are a part of a degree team, a 7th degree. But it's a fun thing for us to do as a family and lodge members that are part of that. And it's a great way for us to stay engaged one with the other across generations.
What a blessing, though, to be able to do that with your family. That's really neat. I mean, we've got, I think that it's fairly common for a lodge to have a group of Masons, Scottish Rite Masons say, okay, we're going to do just by happenstance, I'm the degree master of the 15th, and most of the guys, I think one guy in the degree team is not from my mother lodge. So I think but to have family, your father, your son, your nephew, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's a great thing. And that's one of the benefits, I think, in South Carolina. We've talked about with the other Grand Masters during the Conference of Grand Masters. I served as chairman of that for this past February. And one of the things we found was in comparing the if you will, the membership of each jurisdiction, one of the reasons I think a lot of the southeastern lodges have higher numbers on a per capita basis, like South Carolina still has about 31,000 Master Masons, but a population of just a little bit over 4 million. If you do the math on that, we're at one of the higher percentages of Masonic age men that percentage-wise are Masons. And a lot of that has to do with the familial contact. I mean, the father, son, grandfathers, and a lot of younger men tell me today they're Masons because their grandfather impressed them with how they lived and how they acted, and it impressed them enough that they joined the fraternity. Our job is to put them to work and pass the tools of leadership to them so that they can take their active part.
And we're going to talk about those tools of leadership in just a minute. He's tipping his hand here, fellas, tipping his hand there. Tell me about the role your wife, your family play in this journey of yours.
Lynn is a wonderful woman. She is a great compliment. We share a common bond of trying to serve others. She does hold me accountable. But
somebody's got to.
Yeah, thank God for that, right? But essentially what Lynn brings to the balance in my life is the fact that she is there with me on most occasions, not all, especially with Grand Master, her being the First Lady. She did some remarkable things to create and build the family approach, staying in touch with all the Grand Lodge officers' wives, inviting them to special events. And she also did a lot with in the Scottish Rite rolls as well. I mean, we were just at a Feast of Tishrei dinner last night in my home valley, and she was there, and most of the ladies sat together and were planning their next event, trying to do something for the holiday season for the Rite Care program. So very much involved. Her background, her father, her uncles were all very active Masons. I was a Mason. Her sons are Masons. So as she said in many other meetings, she knew Masonry really from an early age, so she always felt like Masonry was going to be part of her life, regardless of who she met in the future. But so when we got married several years ago, I'll say, to protect her age and dates, but we've had a great journey together, lots of opportunities to travel, meet fabulous people, and I will tell you that the ladies of the Supreme Council members are very close. Most of them spend a lot of time together, and when they have that opportunity, they make a difference with each other. And it's a special person that takes on the spousal role for an active Mason. as we all know. We'll sit together and have dinner, but one of the key questions is, all right, what's on the calendar for this week?
Right.
And so there are times that I put things on the calendar that are hard and fast. These are family times. And one of the things I've done as Grand Master and now in this Lieutenant Grand Commander's role is I try to put together a calendar and send to the Grand Commander so he knows what my activities are and where I'm going, what I'm doing, and if he needs me to do something, he knows that's kind of the calendar I'm working with. So that's a tool, I think, just out of respect for his time and his travels. So
let's talk about your vision and what it is you're planning on doing as Lieutenant Grand Commander. One of the big projects you're tackling here are our 2020 workshops. For folks who are experienced Scottish Rite Masons, on the odd years we have the biennial session, and during even years we have leadership workshops where we get together and talk about strategies for pushing the craft forward, pushing the fraternity forward. And so that's one of the things you're working on. Tell us about what it is you've got in mind right now towards that end.
Well, in conversation with the Grand Commander as well as the members of council, one of the key initiatives we've always had is trying to form a strategic plan that would help us to engage more members. And engagement means more than just invited to do something. It means really getting in there and owning it. And so part of what our leadership conferences have changed over the years to become is a place where we can gather together as Scottish Rite Masons, and not just the leadership of the Valley. It's all about trying to bring in those men who are taking leadership roles, as in, for example, a VMAP chairman, or maybe a membership retention or membership committee chairman. Maybe it's somebody that's doing fundraising activities in the community or public awareness. So we're trying to bring more of our active members together so they can network and we can improve our communications. I think we talked earlier today, one of our biggest issues in my estimation is how we could improve our communication. Where we've tried things, from my experience, we've got people in a couple valleys that do certain little things. One is we make phone calls on people's birthdays. Simple thing, but it means a lot to the guys that are shut in. It means a lot. We can stay in touch, and we can help when we need to. But the other one is we've gotten men now engaged in taking leadership roles through the Fellows Program. And what we found with that is we need to improve the way we communicate prior to every meeting. So several of our valleys and some of our youngest members have really taken the ball on this and made a huge impact on our attendance, engagement, participation. Some of my valleys in 2002 and 2003, when I first started, attendance for a business meeting might be 30 men, and most of them white hats. And they got involved with what's for dinner, what's for education, and what are the key things in this meeting we're going to cover. And over time, that communication consistently done and delivering quality education and delivering on the other aspects of that by communicating what's important this month, that has gotten us now in some cases where we're 80 to 100 members participating, and it's a cross-section of all men, all age groups, all levels of the organization. But even now that we've established KSA groups, our KCCH groups are doing a lot more things to help us in the valleys. KSA has been really a beautiful thing to us. So we're trying to capture in the leadership conferences those things that have worked and try to share those and network them. Not everybody can do everything, so we got to find some things that work for us, and that's what we hope to help generate with a expanded leadership conference format we're putting together now.
And details of that are going to be in the next couple of issues of the Scottish Rite Journal. As details emerge, more will be published so that you can find out about it. Of course, the website, scottishrite.org, is always a good place to keep in touch. But you did hint at the passing tools of leadership. We're carrying that theme through. That was the theme of the session, and that's kind of being carried through.
Exactly. And in consultation with Grand Commander Cole, we thought that would be a great way to continue that messaging. And the thought here is it's not only about somebody giving up something, it's about teaching and mentoring and training somebody to take the role in the future. Story from a leadership conference a few years ago, if I could.
Sure.
I was actually leading a session about the different generations that make up the Scottish Rite. And we started that about 10 years ago, long before you heard about millennials and Gen X and all that. We started talking about it from a standpoint of the types of 5 generations of men that come together. And quite honestly, the new 18-year-olds will become what I call the little I generation. That's my phrase because they've grown up with I products their whole life instead of the Generation Z that you might hear about. But to me, it's all about what are the things that we have to do to communicate and stay in touch with one another. And by doing that, we're trying to teach what the passing of the tools is all about. You have to bring men in who can earn the trust and also earn the skills to be the leaders of the future. And that's what Leadership Conference is all about. So passing the tools of leadership is all about preparing the next generation of leaders to lead our valley so that we're sustainable for the longer term. In our older generation, the biggest challenge and task we have is to not lose their extensive knowledge and what they've done for the craft. And so there's so many great men that sit quietly now. They have a white hat or maybe even a 50-year blue cap, and we don't ask them enough about what is their experience and what could we learn from that. And so we're trying to figure that out. It's not about looking. I'm not a look in the rearview mirror guy. I'm a look ahead guy. But we've got to always respect our past. Coming from South Carolina, that's critically important to what Scottish Rite means to me. But it's all about how do I take what those founding 11 gentlemen did and take it forward so that the next generation, long after I'm gone, is still enjoying the benefits of a Scottish Rite Freemasonry.
And those are the questions we're going to try and answer
Absolutely.
During some of those sessions.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. A couple of things we're going to do is we're going to focus on the VMAP successes. That's been a great program. It's maybe time to look at that and how do we help each other now that we've learned some things at work. Let's communicate those and share those. And another session we're going to be is how do we engage our youngest members, newest members, not on account of age, but a fact that they're maybe a 32nd degree black hat member. What can we do to help them get prepared? And some people are geared to be the guy that's in the kitchen or that does staging and whatnot, and some people are going to be leaders of the craft. And we have to identify and help each other develop that. And I think that's going to sustain us for next several generations.
And I think we also want to instill the idea that there's a difference between being a leader and being a boss. And I think the newer generation is acutely aware of that. They don't mind hard work, but they want to know that there is a lead and there is a direction and that someone is working with them, not just somebody barking orders.
Yeah, and I guess the simplest term I would say the difference between a leader and a boss is a leader listens and a boss tells. And so if you can learn to listen to what's going on and adapt and put together strategies, plans, and tactics that work together versus just telling people what to do, that day's long past in the corporate world, and I think it's long past, quite honestly, in the Masonic world too.
Tell me about your mentor as a Mason.
Well, there were several, but I would mention one in particular who was a great leader in my home valley when I was a very young Mason. Illustrious brother Don Blair. He's still very much on my thoughts and in my prayers too. His health's not good. I did have him come and sit with us at a recent meeting at Scottish Rite, but his ritual work and his ability to coordinate and work with men really impressed me. There's been lots of men through this journey that have been impressive. I mean, certainly Ronnie Seal and Jim Cole were two guys that certainly have had a major impact on so many. But I would just say to you, those men, along with countless others, past Grand Masters and other men that I've known through the valleys that I've dealt with, that are just outstanding men of character who have made a difference in the world. And that's what I've always tried to do. That comes from what my mother and father taught me. You've got to make a difference and you got to do things the right way, and nothing wrong with being humble, because at the end of the day, it's not about you. It's about what you can do for others and how you can help. So those are what influenced me, my parents as well as those key Masonic leaders.
If you could kind of take one Scottish Rite lesson in particular, and you mentioned the 7th degree that you do with your family, which I think is just the coolest thing in the world. If you could take one Scottish Rite degree, one thought from the Scottish Rite and kind of give it to everybody, give it to say, this is the one that I think will make the world a better place today. Which one is that?
I would say it's probably one of my favorite degrees is the 18th degree. And the admonition we give in an open ceremony like renewal and remembrance. May the peace of our Master be with you and remain with you always. Remember that it's always better to love than to hate. It is not our duty to be better than our brothers, but to be better than ourselves. And that the more we have, the more we owe those who in need around us. And that phrase sticks with me. I've used it a lot in my Masonic career. and it says a lot about who we are. It teaches about humility, it teaches about giving and ultimate charity, but it also talks about what you have to do to become a better person. That says a lot to me, and I have the great pleasure of being part of that team occasionally too. So.
Well, it has been wonderful speaking with you, and I'm so glad we got this time to sit down and chat, and I know that all the brothers listening are as well. So thank you so much, and we look forward to maybe prying a few more details about those the upcoming workshops out of you in the coming weeks.
Those are coming soon, but plan to check your registration in October, and we'll get or November rather, and we'll start to put more of the details out. But we're looking forward to it. If the craft can come and be with us, it'll be a great experience, I promise.